And it's like preparing to live stream the event.
It says it's live on YouTube right now. That's the notification I'm getting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
It's in my upper left screen. Live on YouTube, it says.
And it's like preparing to live stream the event.
It says live.
It says it's live on YouTube right now. That's the notification I'm getting.
Oh, really?
It's in my upper left screen. Live on YouTube.
We're
So
getting
someone
an
has to
echo.
turn their volume down.
It says
That would be
live.
Janet. Yeah.
Live on YouTube right now. That's
There.
Wait a minute, can I still hear anybody?
Yeah, I think so.
Nope, I can't hear anybody. All right, let me figure out how to do this
How do you
because I
mean you
still
can't
need to
hear
be able to
anybody?
hear people.
Jenny, mute the tab YouTube, isn't
Can I
it?
still hear anybody?
Yeah, I think so.
Nope, I can't hear anybody. All right. let me
Right
figure
click
out
on the
how to do
tab
this,
and mute the tab
because I still
YouTube,
need
isn't
to
it?
be able to hear people.
Jenny, mute the tab YouTube,
Can
isn't
I
it?
still hear anybody?
This is brilliant.
Let me
Right click
figure
on
out
the tab.
It's like living in a very small time displacement bubble.
Mhm.
Yep, okay. I
It'll
managed
play
to
out.
mute that.
Awesome.
Got
Yay.
it. We are actually being live streamed now. Let's go to part
Hello,
2
everybody.
of this. Wait 1 second.
Yeah, I know.
We need
Awesome. And we're giving it a 3, 2, 1 count. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our 4th Winnipeg Worldcon in 2023 Zoom event, which is also being live streamed to YouTube on July 25th, 2021. I am Lori E. Smith, your social media host, and today we will be posing important questions to the Winnipeg in 23 bid committee. Some of the questions have been submitted by fans, so I'm sure we can look forward to a few surprises. First, though, let's get right down to business with our weekly updates of news in the science fiction and fantasy sector. In spaceflight news, I'm sure everybody already knows that Jeff Bezos, arguably the world's richest man, went to space and back on Tuesday aboard a rocket and capsule system developed by his space company, Blue Origin. His passenger guests included his brother, an 18-year-old high school student whose father bought his ticket, but more importantly, as far as I'm concerned, Wally Funk, an 82-year-old pilot and one of the Mercury 13 women who trained to go to space in the 20th century, but who never got to fly because NASA decided no women in orbit. Well, Wally finally had her opportunity to touch the edge of space. It was a long time coming, but she lived to see it, and that really warms my heart. Meanwhile, on Mars, the Perseverance Mars rover is set to acquire its first rock sample from the Martian surface. This has been a mission full of firsts, including the first helicopter to fly in the Martian atmosphere, and the rock sample in question will be stored for a future mission to pick up and deliver back to Earth. The key objective for the Perseverance mission is astrobiology, or the search for traces of ancient life on the red planet, so this is a major step in fulfilling that mandate. From outer space to our inner selves. ScienceDaily.com features a psychology article this week about a wearable brain-machine interface that turns intentions into actions. The Georgia Institute of Technology reports that an international team of researchers is combining soft scalp electronics with virtual reality in a brain interface system, which could allow the wearer to control a wheelchair, a robotic arm, and other devices. The brain-machine interface, or BMI, permits the wearer to imagine an action and wirelessly control a remote device. This research even has potential to help those struggling with locked-in syndrome, which is when a person is fully conscious but unable to move or communicate. And that is a huge step forward and will alleviate a great deal of suffering. Turning to geopolitics, the Canadian government has announced the steps and dates for reopening the border to visitors from the US, woo, and visitors from any country, assuming current epidemiology remains favorable. I hope I said that correctly. Epidemiology, yes. Details can be found in the Woot Border Reopened post on the Winnipeg in 23 blog, which can be found on our website. Google Winnipeg in 23 Worldcon to easily find it. Speaking of Winnipeg, our lovely city is in Time magazine. Time magazine has chosen Winnipeg as one of the world's 100 greatest places of 2021. Simply Google Winnipeg Time Magazine 2021 to find the article and learn a few of the ways in which Winnipeg is truly a world-class city. We would like to offer sincere congratulations to the following authors on receiving a well-deserved honor, induction into the 2021 Canadian Science Fiction and Fantasy Hall of Fame. Stan Hyde, the late Monica Hughes, and Jean-Louis Trudel. Details can be found on the sfwriter.com website blog in their April 24th entry. And finally, be sure to tune into next Sunday's Twitch TV segment, episode 8, for an account of another bizarre and outrageous disaster. Here's a hint. How fast does molasses move in January? Find out at 1 p.m. on August 1st, 2021. And that's today's weekly news update. I'd now like to turn the meeting over to questions for the Winnipeg in 23 Bid Committee. The way this works is I will handle the first set of questions, followed by questions from our viewers. Viewers can submit questions through the chat here in Zoom or in the YouTube chat while this is live streaming to YouTube. And Carl Fink will be handling the viewer question segment. When Carl takes over, he will unmute people so they can speak in the Zoom event. But first, let's talk about the basics. Bid committee members, are you ready?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. Today we have 4 categories of questions: a general section, a travel section, a facility section, and some miscellaneous questions. After these questions are addressed by the bid committee, I will turn the meeting over to Carl for questions from the fans. Let's start out with the general questions. Bid committee, what is the name of your bid? What dates are you bidding for? And what is your proposed convention host city?
We're called Winnipeg in 2023. We're looking at August 24th through the 28th in 2023, and our main facility will be the Royal Bank Convention Center. Actually, the RBC Convention Center. Excuse me.
That's actually another question. What are your main facilities? So you're saying the RBC Convention Center site of the 1994 Worldcon?
That's right, as well as the Delta Hotel next door to it.
But with an extra tower.
Oh, on the RBC Convention Center, yes,
On the RBC Center, because that wasn't there before.
They've made additions and improvements. Is your convention site in a city center location?
It's
in the city center.
Let's step back a little bit, just for funsies. So we have Terry Fong, who is our bid committee chair.
Hi.
And Robbie Bourget, who is one of our vice chairs. I'm Janie Shea, who is one of our vice chairs. And Carl Fink, who is one of our bid committee members, who is very kindly helping us moderate and run this thing.
And of course, you already know who I am. Booth babe extraordinaire. The next question is, how far are your hotels from your main venue?
We're currently looking at hotels within about a 6 or 8 block radius from the convention center. Excuse me.
But the main hotel is across on the skywalk.
Yeah.
Yes.
The thing to remember, this is Winnipeg. Winnipeg has winters. Most of the downtown area is connected in some way or another by the skywalk. So people won't have to necessarily walk outside unless they choose to. And one of the other advantages to it is that we're talking Canadian blocks, not American blocks. So they're actually rather small compared to, say, Los Angeles.
Yes. Yes, our downtown blocks are not that big. Also, a lot of hotels and venues downtown are connected by the skywalk system. If you decide to go to the other side of Portage Avenue, at Portage and Main, which is downtown and our central transportation hub, it's all underground. There are underground restaurants and shopping centers and stuff like that. So if you go there, you can do everything underground. The next set of questions I'd like to ask is, who is your bid chair? Who is on your committee? What experience do they have in general and specifically in running Worldcons?
Terry?
Well, I'm the bid chair on our committee. We're still in the middle of formulating it, but I think we're up to about 30 people on our committee. Sorry, the last question was experience, I believe? Yeah.
There's two last questions. What experience do they have in general and specifically in running Worldcons?
We range from volunteer or staff, actually, staff level members all the way up to previous chairs.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi. Previous chair right here.
That's
a number. Yeah, a number of division heads and things like that.
And people can find a list of who is on the committee on the Winnipeg in 23 website. Is that correct?
Yes.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone have anything to add to that particular question set?
Yeah, I'd like to say that it's important to realize that almost everybody on this committee has previous experience, and for the most part at the higher level within Worldcons, but they also have experience of other conventions outside of Worldcons.
For example, Linda Ross Mansfield has been deeply involved in KeyCon, which is Manitoba's longest running science fiction fantasy convention for a number of years.
I was silly and started a convention in Los Angeles called Gallifrey One. Terry's been involved in various Montreal conventions. We're currently about to put on the World Fantasy Con in Montreal.
Montreal.
Thank you. That's because I haven't been able to travel. I'm living in the UK. That means I haven't really been paying as much attention as I should, perhaps, just because I knew I couldn't get to it.
Now, if known, who will be the chair of the Winnipeg in 23 convention, and what experience do they have?
That would be me, currently slated to be me, and my experience is
Terry has run a lot of things.
yeah, I've run a fair number of things. I've been vice chair of a number of conventions and division head for Worldcon several times. And
he has a lot of help.
I have a lot of help, yeah.
But still, that sounds like a pretty good background.
Yeah.
Now, the last question in this segment is, have you agreed to participate in pass-along funds? Would you be willing to increase the percentage from 50% to 70% of surplus? I know nothing about what that means. Can you explain it?
It's a stability fund, pass-along fund. Anyone who commits to it commits to passing along a certain percentage of their surplus after the convention.
Should they have one?
Should they have one?
Yeah, should they have one to future conventions?
And
the future two conventions, correct?
So 2 or 3.
The next 2.
The next 2
is what you must promise if you're going to promise pass along. You may have sufficient surplus to pass along to more than the next 2.
Yeah.
The reason it's set at 50% of your surplus is that theoretically after 2, there won't be anything more. So if you raise that to 70%,
yeah, there's been discussion about raising it to 70.
It'd be kind of difficult to go to 2, but you'd do much better for the very next convention. Realistically, if you've invested your surplus somewhere, you might still have another 70% the following year. But that depends upon the investment you've made. That depends upon how the investment sector is doing even.
Well, that doesn't quite answer the questions. Have you agreed to participate in pass-along funds?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
absolutely.
Would you be willing to increase the percentage from 50 to 70% of surplus?
I think we'd have to consider whether or not.
We'd have to consider it at that.
We're open to the discussion.
Yeah, we're discussing it. We discuss it. Yeah,
because that's fair enough. It's a case of thinking: do we benefit two following conventions, or maybe 3, or do we benefit only 1, and then we can't really give anything to anybody else because we don't have 70% anymore?
Exactly. Okay, that's fair enough. Let's move on to the next section, unless anyone has anything to add. Let's move on to the next section, which is travel. The first question is, what is the typical current airfare to your closest airport, which would be the Winnipeg International Airport, from world cities such as London, Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles, Melbourne, and so on? Do we have any numbers on that?
We do, but you must remember that these numbers are in the middle of a worldwide pandemic.
Yes, of course, which means that, yeah.
So right now they do really reflect who is in lockdown and who is not in lockdown. So for just a range, like for example, because I looked up these numbers today and these are in US dollars, from New York, Chicago, and Dallas, we're all talking about like the mid 5,500 range for a round trip. 500 range. Right.
Whoa, dude. Watch the decimal point.
Right. Sorry, 500 range.
Yeah.
Los Angeles is relatively reasonable at roughly 400, and we are talking about round trips. London, a touch under 1,000. Paris, 700. Tel Aviv, 686. And then we get to the far overseas where Chengdu clocks in at 3,229. Sydney is at nearly 10,000.
Whoa.
Wellington
That
is
counts,
a
right.
little bit more reasonable, but that's still just a touch under 4,000.
For those who do
And-
not know, that is Wellington, New Zealand.
Yeah, Wellington, New Zealand, and then Taipei, Taiwan is at 1,886.
That's quite a range.
That's a
for the
range, and
overseas.
I
we
think
expect
some of
this to be.
probably reflects areas which are traveling more than other areas,
Well,
because
yeah, and
Australians
Sydney,
are not traveling out of country at the moment,
Yeah,
particularly due to the fact
yeah.
that if they go out of country, they may not be allowed back.
So
I would
basically,
hope that by 2023 that would have ended.
what we're saying at this point is that these are current numbers. They are only current numbers. They are almost inevitably likely to change.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a very dynamic market at the moment.
Okay, so perhaps we can revisit that question at a future bid committee Q&A when things have stabilized a bit. Now,
Yeah, I think that'd probably be a question we raised again after we win, because it's not
Yes.
that long until the vote takes place.
that's very true. And I agree. Question number 2 in the travel segment. Do international flights as well as domestic fly into your local airport? Which airlines? There is a segment here that says, if not, where's the closest international airport? But that doesn't apply because Winnipeg is an international airport.
Well, yes, but the thing to remember about it is it's been renovated. It's much bigger now than it was in 1994.
Four.
1994 was when the last Worldcon
Yes, you're
happened in
right,
Winnipeg.
1994, so long ago. But you've got everybody. You've got Air Canada, you've got Delta, United, major
It's-
regionals.
As well as some of
WestJet,
the,
Swoop.
as well as the major overseas airlines, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
Well, to remember, Air Canada does overseas travel. For example, I can catch Air Canada from either Gatwick if I choose, or from Heathrow. And that's true of most of the European cities. It's also
The
true
other,
down south.
the other
They're also-
question,
They also have a connection with Air New Zealand for coming from that part of the world. So it makes it pretty easy.
well, here's the last question for this particular part. Are direct flights from the cities above, the ones that you mentioned, Janny, and quoted the numbers on, are direct flights from the cities above flown into the Winnipeg airport? So direct flights from Paris,
from
Tel
the
Aviv,
US
Chengdu.
The US cities, yes. The farther over cities, chances are reasonable that even if it wasn't during pandemic times, you'd still have to make a connection somewhere. Not unless you want to do the god awful 23-hour, what is it, the world's longest flight from, I forgot, it's Singapore to London. Something really, but yeah,
But the
just
thing
for
is- but the
sanity
thing- but
sakes,
the-
you'll break it up.
But the thing is, even if an international flight, say from Chengdu, China, does not come to the Winnipeg International Airport, it would come to Toronto, which is a very
Yes,
short
yeah,
hop
no,
away
there are all
from
connectors.
Winnipeg.
There are connectors, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes,
So-
yes.
Actually, I would think that from Chengdu, you'd probably stop in either Calgary or Vancouver.
No,
Yeah.
Vancouver, Calgary is less likely to have it from Chengdu.
Oh, okay.
But the point is, even from Vancouver, it's a very short hop to Winnipeg.
Mhm.
Oh,
relatively
absolutely.
speaking.
That's
And a
the
very-
advantage
and-
of Winnipeg being in the center.
And usually a very cheap hop to Winnipeg.
Mm-hmm.
At least it used to be. I'm not sure what it is now. The next question in this segment is, how far is your convention site from the nearest airport or train station, and what is the likely cost of getting to the hotels by both public transport and taxi from the airport or the train station?
I got that one.
Go.
It's
Go.
10 to 15 minutes from the James Richardson International Airport. You can get there by taxi, rideshare, city bus, limo, chartered bus, or car rental if you really must. Although, who wants to deal with parking? Although Winnipeg parking is not that bad.
No.
The least expensive way to do it is to do it by the city bus, where I am told that if you buy your ticket in advance, it's only $2.60 Canadian.
Wow.
Taxi fare is roughly about $25 Canadian.
That's about right. The train station in Winnipeg is actually right in the downtown, about a 4 or 5 block walk from the convention center, if I
Okay.
recall correctly, the Union Station.
I think it's just a little bit further, but yeah, it's definitely in downtown.
Mhm.
It's not out in the boonies like some places are.
No. And I'm trying to remember where our bus station is now. The bus
Couldn't tell you.
station
I know
used
where
to be right.
Montreal's is.
The bus station used to be right downtown by the University of Winnipeg, which is a very short walk to the convention center.
Well,
We don't know what the state of bus travel will be at the time of our convention.
yeah, because
Yeah, because there
We
have
don't
been
need to get into that.
bus companies closing down various routes lately, so it'll depend upon how they recover, presumably from the pandemic.
Yeah. Okay, so that takes care of our travel section. Shall we move on to facility questions?
Oh, yes.
Question number 1. What hotels are being used for the convention? How many rooms, what type, and accessibility issues, and so on? Anything else you'd like to add to that?
we're still in negotiations. We're looking at 1,500 or so rooms, single all the way up to quad, rollaway beds included, you know, the usual full range of rooms for Worldcon.
And there are accessible rooms in some
Yes.
of the hotels, but not in
Yes.
every hotel.
Yeah, we're
At
still
least
trying.
one of the hotels has
Yeah.
modified itself to not include that sort of feature, but several of the other hotels still have it.
And there is one hotel which I believe is called the Alt, which has a particularly, from what I understand, large number of accessible rooms.
Mhm.
But so how many rooms are we talking about at this point?
At this point, we're in negotiations.
Okay, so you really have no
So
number.
we don't really have a complete idea, but we are looking to try and obtain 1,500 rooms, as Terry mentioned.
Excellent.
Now, for comparison purposes, we are told that there are roughly 1,900, let me do my math again, 1,900 hotel rooms in the downtown core alone. So I think we will have sufficient accommodations for the number of fans we expect.
And of course, there's also the option, if you want to try that, if Airbnb is still around and working, you might also be
Airbnb working around, the university dorms, youth hostels. You can go to hotels outside of the downtown core. We will not stop you. We are not limiting you.
Yep.
We're just saying most people want to be in as close as possible.
Well, also a lot of the hotels that are a reasonable distance from city center, outside of city center, are on major bus routes.
Yes,
So getting to downtown and getting back to your hotel is probably not going to be a problem, even if you do use the bus and your hotel is outside of city center.
correct. And we have proposals from, it feels like every single hotel in town, although I'm sure that is an exaggeration, but we do have quite a few.
So what are your hotel room rates like? Do these rates include breakfast? Do they include internet in the room? And how firm are these rates? And what additional taxes and fees are there? Okay, I got to catch my breath after that. So what do you guys have to say about that?
We're looking the 140 to 160 Canadian range. Excuse me.
For now.
Taxes are 5% GST, 8% provincial sales tax, and I believe there's a 5% city tax. What was that? What else is there?
Do they include breakfast? Do they include internet?
They don't usually include breakfast, I don't think, and most of them do include internet.
Mm-hmm.
Internet's become almost required by most hotels.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know the Radisson, where KeyCon is held every year, when they give you your room card, they also give you your little internet passcode, so you can use it freely.
And the thing to remember is the convention center itself has complete accessible Wi-Fi throughout.
Mm-hmm. And
so if you do happen to end up in a hotel room without Wi-Fi, just go to the convention, enjoy the Wi-Fi there.
Yeah.
In terms of breakfast, there are cheap breakfast options available downtown, but we can talk about that a bit later in the restaurant part. Question number 3 in the facilities section is, what does parking cost at your main hotels? Do we know that at this point?
Right now, the Delta is quoting $18 Canadian per day.
Okay.
But that can be part of the negotiations we have
Yes.
with them, so that parking could end up being included with your hotel room cost. This has happened in other conventions as well. But that's part of the negotiating process.
Okay. Question number 4, what is the distance from the nearest door of your main hotel, the Delta, to the closest entrance of the convention center? And what are the transportation options for those who prefer not to walk or who may have mobility issues?
Well, the Delta is connected by Skywalk, and the next 2 hotels we're looking at, I think it is, are within 1 block. Excuse me. And we're looking at a variety of options, including, public transit is always an option. Walking is always an option.
Mobility scooters.
Yeah, we're looking
Yes,
at.
we are looking at availability of mobility scooters, and it's something that we would provide on a cost basis to members.
Yeah, and we are already looking into a shuttle bus service for some
as we
some
had
hotels.
In 1994.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, when you say that the Delta is connected by Skywalk to the convention center, how close is it? A block,
across
2
the
blocks?
Street.
Okay.
Across the street, yeah.
There you go.
It's basically the Skywalk connects this building to that building across the street.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Quite close, obviously.
So in other words, to get from the Delta to the convention center, obviously you don't even have to go outside, just go straight over. Okay. Terry, I seem to recall you mentioning that you were also looking into wheelchair availability for the convention, as well as mobility scooters. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Do we have a number on how many of either of those might be available at this point, or is that something that's still in the negotiation stage?
Negotiation stage. It's all negotiations.
Okay. Question number 5 in the facilities segment. Where will your large events, such as the Hugo ceremony and the masquerade, be held?
The convention center itself, the main convention center.
Do you have any
Probably
idea?
the top floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is the really big convention spaces.
Yes.
Here's the question. Please describe the restaurant scene near your site.
How did I put it? Varied is the word. Is the term I used.
It's rich and varied.
Be careful when you use the word rich.
True.
Rich here in Montreal would mean artery hardening, if you will.
Oh, I see. Okay, it's a terminology thing. What I say when I mean rich is that there's a lot of different, very distinct cuisines.
Yeah,
absolutely. The last time I was in Winnipeg, I could have chosen almost any kind of cuisine I wanted from almost anywhere, and including for those people who are poutine lovers like myself, there is, or at least there has been, a place that does a huge range of poutine, literally a huge range. I stuck with the normal because I missed it very much, but literally Winnipeg provides the food that people want. And since it has a varied historical and ethnical background, it has food from a broad range.
We have 100 different languages plus that are spoken in our city.
Yeah, it also
with cuisines to match.
Yeah, and it's a very important point to make is that we tend to look very hard into food trucks. Food trucks are a very important part of Winnipeg culture.
A very important part of Winnipeg culture, and also every time there's a major event at the convention center, the food trucks come running. Yeah. And if you don't like any of the food trucks that happen to be at the convention center, walk about a block to Broadway, which is just south of the convention center, and you'll find a whole bunch more food trucks. So it's a very food truck heavy culture.
Yeah, if you want a fancy dinner, you can get one. If you want something quick and fast, you can get that.
Yep, we have food courts that serve like A&W or Taco Bell or whatever, or you can go to High's Steakhouse or Bailey's Steakhouse, which is about a 10-minute walk from the convention center, and get a $100 steak dinner. It really covers the range.
Absolutely. I stuck with the cheap options.
There's also the East India Company, which is a wonderful East Indian restaurant, a very big East Indian restaurant in the downtown area, and the King's Head Pub, where if you want to get your British on, that's the place you go. Does anyone have anything to add to the restaurant scene?
Not
I don't think
particularly,
so.
just as I expect to be making use of them.
Yep, and there's a lot of different choices within downtown.
Mhm.
Question number 7, what arrangements will be made for evening socializes and party space? And do you have a corkage waiver?
Corkage
We are
waiver is something,
negotiating corkage waiver,
yeah, we're negotiating for that. Yeah.
because if we don't, we'd be upset. Because it's something that we have at every convention. We will be negotiating that. Whichever hotel gives us the best negotiation will probably be used as the central party hotel.
Okay.
And it will be one of the closer ones. At the same time, I fully expect that every suite in that hotel will be taken for a party of some sort.
So at this point, the arrangements are in negotiation, and to some extent, it depends on whether there's a corkage waiver or not. Is that correct?
Basically.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Please describe the policies and laws regarding smoking in your hotels, convention center, and city as a whole.
As I have spent the time to actually look up the policy, there is no smoking indoors in any facility anywhere within most of Canada, including Winnipeg. Outdoor smoking depends upon the place you're in. If it is a public facility, outdoor smoking is not permitted. That may sound a bit odd, but for example, at the train station, you may be standing on the platform, but you're still inside a public facility, even if you're in the open air, and therefore you may not smoke. It's that sort of thing.
What about smoking on patios?
If it's
like restaurants?
your own personal patio or a smoking area of a restaurant, it's permitted. If it is the hotel's patio, the hotel will have regulated that and will have signs to indicate whether or not they allow smoking or do not allow smoking.
I believe Winnipeg has banned smoking on restaurant patios as well.
Okay.
I
Well, you
believe
know what?
so as well.
Let me just double check that. You guys talk amongst yourselves while I Winnipeg smoking. Google, hooray! Winnipeg smoking
I'd be
public.
surprised they haven't banned it. I thought most cities in Canada had.
No, there's a link that back in 2011 that that Winnipeg banned smoking in outdoor patios.
No, smoking on outdoor patios at bars and restaurants in Winnipeg is currently permitted.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I read as well.
That's on www.winnipeg.ca.
Oh, okay.
And
I
that,
mean, there will be some places that will have still got it banned, but that's probably because their patio doesn't actually give them sufficient space to allow smoking and people to separate themselves from the smokers.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. The last question in this section is this. Given the current pandemic, have you considered any arrangements have been made for social distancing and the health and safety of members? If you have, can you describe what your current plans are?
We will be following whatever health and safety guidelines, both the public health agencies and the venues both impose and recommend.
Yes.
It's 2 years from now. We don't know.
No, it's
Yeah, I
impossible
mean,
to tell.
Yeah.
Realistically, just like any convention that's currently restarting at this time,
Yeah.
if there are still rules in place, which there may be or there may not, we will
look,
follow
yeah.
public health guidelines to the T, and
Mhm,
we will
yeah.
expect all our members to cooperate.
Mhm.
Here's a question, which is not on the list, but just occurred to me. Will a Winnipeg in 23 World Science Fiction Convention have disposable masks available for members if they choose?
I
It's a good
suspect
question because I'm not really a fan of
so.
disposable masks. They make a lot of litter. But if public health is still advising that this is suggested, then yes. I think if somebody chooses to have a mask beyond when Public Health Canada says it's necessary, they should provide their own, simply because if you don't have to provide for everybody at the convention center, how would you know how many to get?
Terry, what do you have to say about that?
I'd be surprised if we're not going to provide some. I would be surprised if we're not. I'd be surprised if our culture hasn't changed such that public masking becomes more accepted and more normal, if you will.
Much as it is in China, Japan,
Yeah, exactly.
Korea, places
Yeah.
of that nature that have always done masks.
Do conventions in countries that have a mask culture provide disposable masks at large events? Do you know?
I didn't notice it at Japan.
No, I didn't see it in Japan either.
Okay.
It was generally a case of if you had the sniffles, cold, anything of that sort, you bring your own.
Yeah.
Okay. So that answers that question. Does anyone have anything to add in terms of facilities?
Just that we're very proud of them. They're wonderful space in the RBC and wonderful space in all the nearby hotels. So we're very pleased by what we have available to the fans.
Jani, in the blog post which you made on our main website about where Tourism Winnipeg did all those videos for us, did they have an RBC Convention Center video?
Yes, they did.
So people
They
can
did.
go. So people can go to just Google Winnipeg in 23 Worldcon. That should bring our site up. Go to the blog section, and there will be a section there about Tourism Winnipeg videos, and you can actually see our convention center in action.
Yeah, just look for the tag virtual tour.
Yeah, and that'll give you a sight of exactly what Robbie's talking about. We have a wonderful convention center. It is truly awesome. I was last there in late 2019, and it's great. It's wonderful. So if nobody has anything to add, let's move on to the last section, miscellaneous. Question number 1, what type of weather can we expect during your convention, and what is the average temperature during that time of year in Winnipeg?
Where is it? Average high in the high 20s, low 30s, lows in the mid-teens. Celsius. It's all Celsius. You can expect some rain, but it's not expected.
And often, even in August, if we have a hot spell, if a thunderstorm rolls through, that's going to drop the temperature real quick down into the 20s.
Oh yeah, I love thunderstorms in Canada.
Yeah.
Anything from 25 up, a thunderstorm may be on its way.
Yeah, and I will say that Winnipeg in August does tend to be a bit humid.
But it's not quite weather related, but you might be able to see an aurora display during our convention. It's not guaranteed. Nothing's guaranteed in that respect, but
but it is a possibility.
It's a possibility, yeah.
That answers that question. Question number 2, what are some of the main tourist attractions in your city? Jani?
Okay, what don't we have? Well, just hit the high spots, which are the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. And I know I'm going to muck this up, so I apologize in advance, but it's the Kwamajuk. Thank you. It's the new Inuit collection of Inuit contemporary art that is part of the Winnipeg Art Gallery.
Largest collection of Inuit art in the world.
Yeah, largest publicly available. The Assiniboine Park Zoo, Symington Yard, because I am a rail fan. Thank you. So many places. What we do have is also a great YouTube video, which is our first Twitch episode for. You can go watch it. There's a 19-minute overview of things to do in our city. I don't think you'll be bored.
And that doesn't even cover all of what's available in our city.
No.
So basically,
it's just an overview. It's just an overview.
So basically, it's here on. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, it's here on the YouTube channel. Just go look for Twitch episode 001, and that's the video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about it is all of these places are fairly easily accessible. I've been to the Museum of Human Rights. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Interestingly designed, lots of things you can do, interact with. The Assiniboine Zoo, so wonderful. The animals have their own natural habitats, and some of them, such as Canada geese, have just sort of taken over the walkway areas, which have grass verges, etc. If you do see a Canada goose, don't approach it.
No, it will let you approach it, but don't approach it.
No, don't approach it, because actually, in most cases, they usually have young with them. That's what they're doing in the zoo. They are nesting and having their young. As with any animal, you don't approach them unless they're your personal friends. When they
Well, and Canada geese are known to have a temper. So
pretty well any mom has a temper.
but
Don't
even
approach
Canada,
bears, same reason.
but even in the non fledgling season, they still have a temper.
Well, that's true, but
yeah. And in August, you're moving.
As I've noted here in the UK, where we also have Canada geese, it depends. If they are particularly hungry, they might approach you in hopes that you will feed them. If they are not particularly hungry, they'll ignore you unless you come too close.
Exactly.
At first, they'll hiss, so you have.
So you'll get
move away.
You'll get a warning. I will say that the Manitoba Museum, with its attached planetarium, which offers laser light shows and all kinds of other cool stuff, is easily an all-day entertainment. The last time I went with some friends, we went there starting at 10 in the morning. We broke for lunch at 1, and we were there right until the facility closed at 6. It was tremendous. The Manitoba Museum actually features the Nonsuch, which is a full replica of a 17th century merchant ship that you can go on board and explore. And it's a real showstopper. Anybody else have anything to say about main tourist attractions? Or just go see the video?
Go see the video.
Because it's far too much to mention at one point.
Then let's jump to question number 3. Are you planning to have any membership discounts for certain groups, such as young adults, military, or seniors?
Indubitably, yes.
Planned, but they're under discussion still, because realistically, we have to find out where we're at, look at how we can afford things, and so on. But yeah, there will be. It may also include what we'll call discounts for ethnic minority groups, on the grounds that sometimes they are in the worst position to try and afford something of this nature.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, that sounds reasonable. Question number 4 is a big one. What is your vision for your Worldcon, and how do you plan to make it happen?
That's always a tough question.
It is.
The way I look at it is, to use an old-fashioned expression, is something I would call the gathering of the tribes. Now, tribes can have very negative connotations if you're not careful about it. By tribes, I mean all the various groups that make up SF fandom.
Of which there are quite a few.
There are quite a few, and
I'd like to say it'd be good if we stopped just considering tribes in a North American context. There are tribes in other parts of the world too. Tribe doesn't just mean First Nations. It doesn't just mean ethnic minorities. It means a group of people who associate with each other. Science fiction fandom, fantasy fandom, they're big tribes, and they go all over the world to see each other.
Yep.
And
that's
also
what we want to encourage.
Well, and also, as we discussed in our last Zoom meeting number 3 for the Worldcon in Winnipeg in 2023, the furry convention, the furry fandom is also interested in taking part. They would like to come under that umbrella of inclusivity as well.
They have in the past. It all depends upon the approach of the convention itself. There have been Westercons where there was a big furry contingent. There have been Worldcons that have had furry contingents. There have been costume cons where there have been furry contingents. The one in the Worldcon in Toronto had both furry and cosplay contingents of a Japanese form, which were quite amazing, absolutely delightful to see, especially watching some of the cosplayers in the full bodysuit shopping in the local stores. It was quite interesting.
It sounds like part of the vision for Worldcon that you hold, Terry, is again that inclusivity.
Yes.
That bringing together of many different groups under one umbrella.
Yeah.
Which is the Winnipeg Worldcon in 2023.
Yeah.
What else do you have in terms of a vision for the convention?
I think the most important part of the vision is to see how widely we can spread the net, if that makes sense. To include people who may not have felt included before, to bring them into the center of things rather than as a side issue. As for example, in the past, gaming has frequently had its own space, but not been part of main programming.
Well, I mean, and also Canada has a number of Aboriginal and ethnic authors who have sometimes been marginalized.
And the thing is, marginalizing anyone does no one any good. It creates division. It does not create inclusivity. Anytime somebody's an author, they're an author. They should be on any author panel, regardless of what you will, the subject matter of that panel, because they're an author. Therefore, they have some of the same experiences and some differences that should be discussed.
Well, here's something that I'm not sure if you guys have discussed, but I'm bringing it to your question to you, Terry. Are you considering doing outreach to more marginalized author groups like Aboriginal authors and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's absolutely necessary. I think in order for us to expand our inclusivity and our diversity, we have to we can no longer just sit and wait for them to come to us. We have to go out to them. It's not necessarily one of the community's strengths, but we have to develop it.
And that's very Canadian. Is that multicultural feel?
Oh, well, yes. How about making the Worldcon more multicultural? It can sometimes be monocultural, and sometimes they're proud of it. Sometimes I don't think that's happened in recent memory.
So sorry, go ahead, Robbie.
It is rare for monoculture, but it isn't unusual. And it's particularly unfortunate that this tends to be a North American issue, if you will.
Yeah. By monoculture,
American cities aren't quite accustomed to the concept of multiculturalism, bringing all the groups together, and they're still getting used to it. So they're learning as they go. And I'm glad to see that they are. But when you go to other countries, it's a bit easier to find that multicultural aspect. Montreal had its own multiculturalism in that we had bilingual panels, we had French only, we had English only, we had quite a variety. I think the only difficulty that anybody experienced was that the convention center itself was long.
Not as long as some others, Robbie.
No, but still.
The one that's very close to where you are currently sitting is the example I'm thinking about.
I
depended upon where you were trying to get to from where, how you felt about it.
I seem to recall coming into the area of diversity that when I was at the RBC Convention Center in 2019, they not only had men's and women's bathrooms, they also had gender neutral bathrooms. And I'm gender fluid, so that was like, whoa, thank goodness,
Yeah.
So that kind of thing. This kind of segues into the next question, which I'm going to change up to plural from singular, What are notable aspects of your local fan culture, and how do you plan to incorporate them into your Worldcon?
Econ has been there for quite a long time.
38 years this year.
Yeah. And I've attended several because I have friends in Winnipeg. So it seemed like a good idea. They have a different type of party atmosphere where actually they have groups who run party rooms that are
Hospitality suites.
Yeah, but
which may or may not be party rooms. It depends on the year, because the hospitality suites change.
But for example, sometimes you'd go into one and they'd be doing video games. Others would be doing just videos. One had board gaming one year. That was quite interesting.
The last several years have featured the Dandelion, which is a folk music suite where they hold concerts and so on.
Yep. It's a melange, a little bit of everything thrown in, whatever the fan group wants to put on, basically. Which I think
Sorry, Janny, did you have anything in particular to say about that? Because we were talking about that earlier today.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to paraphrase and co-op another quote, it's worldwide fandoms, community feel, or small town community feel, is one of the things that I really love about Midwest fandom, because they do that.
I mean, if you want to feel inclusive, you need to avoid the big city feel, if you will, because the big city often makes people feel like they're not included. Nobody's paying attention to them. It's very impersonal.
I will say that
towns tend to be friendlier.
I have seen this at KeyCon. I have seen this at the local Wild Prairie Fur Con, the furry convention. I've seen this at a number of local events. If you walk in and you're a stranger, within 10 minutes, you will have like 5 people come up to you and say, hi, we haven't seen you around here before, nice to meet you, what are your interests? And Winnipeg is called Friendly Manitoba for a reason. People here are very inclusive that way. And if you walk into one of our events and you don't know anybody, the chances are pretty good that people will respectfully approach you and say hi.
Absolutely.
You won't be, at KeyCon, we have the newcomer dinner where newcomers to the convention get to meet some of the veterans and stuff. And what we say at KeyCon is if you walk into the newcomer dinner knowing nobody at KeyCon, you're going to walk out of the newcomer dinner knowing 40 people at KeyCon.
Well, so far, every time I've gone to KeyCon, I've ended up doing something for the art show. Not quite sure why, but there you go. I helped with the auction one year. That was great fun.
Yeah. So what are some other notable aspects of local fan culture that you'd like to incorporate into Worldcon?
It's something that we have to invite the local culture to help us with, because it's not something that every single person on the committee is going to be familiar with. And therefore, we're hoping that all the Winnipeg fans will provide as many ideas as they have in order to allow us to bring that experience out. At the moment, we're still waiting for some feedback, but we've had some certainly from Linda Ross Mansfield. And
the furry community as well.
Yeah, and various other fans in that area.
Janny, did you have anything to add?
I think it boils down to community. I mean, that's one of the things that I really, really like, having grown up in Midwest fandom, is that there is everybody knows everybody else in a friendly way, not necessarily a negative way, as in, because yes, being in being in a place that leans a bit Southern culture, United States, there are the positives and the negatives to that, but it's mostly positive that I've always appreciated about Midwest fandom.
Yeah, it's very, there's really an open arms kind of attitude.
Right. And it's the friendly, and everybody else, and they're open to, hey, let's go out and have lunch or something at the drop of a hat.
Yeah,
just to spend time socially engaging.
I mean, at some conventions, what I've done is I kind of have an eye for people who are isolated. you know, or who are kind of like out of their depth, or like, this is my first time here and I really don't know anybody. And I will sometimes, you know, approach people like that respectfully, you know, and say, hey, you know, me and my friends are going out for lunch. Do you want to come? You know, and 90% of the time the answer is yes, please. You know, but Winnipeg is like that.
I have a t-shirt with a red panda that says, I'm not shy. I'm just socially selective.
That's a good shirt.
And I think, you know, a lot of people can be that way because they've had bad experiences in the past, which is unfortunate. And I'd like them to have good experiences, which is what we hope to do at Con.
Yeah.
I know one of your next questions is about code of conduct. That's one of the things I'm specifically working on.
I just want to really quickly add, before we move to the code of conduct question, that I would love to do something like the newcomer dinner at Worldcon, if there's any kind of interest in that, newcomer panel or whatever, just because, you know, that can be useful for some people. The next question it is, Robbie, as you just said, is question number 6. Do you have a code of conduct?
We have the beginnings of one, which at the moment is set for what we'll call social media, distancing, and parties, because that's what we're at the moment. We're developing all the aspects of it. The idea we want is that it will include everybody, but it will also ensure that people know that it's a safe space. If they have a problem, there's someone they can approach, someone they can talk to, someone who will try and resolve their issue for them. Sometimes that resolution may not be a massive issue of kicking somebody out. It may just be an issue of, say, avoid each other. It may be an issue of, you don't have the right to do that. And if you insist on continuing, you will lose your membership. It can be a variety of things. And sometimes it's just a case of improving the communication between two people who don't understand each other because their cultures don't match. As an example, one of my first experiences in Japan was realizing their concept of social distance is not the same as mine. It's much closer, but then it's a much more crowded area. So you have to be impersonal while being very close. One of my experiences here in the UK has been with people from the Indian subcontinent and the African continent. And again, the social distance accepted is completely different from mine, as well as how they use their hands, things of that nature. I grew up in Quebec. Hands are always in motion in Quebec, at full reach even. So you watch where people's hands are as you're walking along, because otherwise you might get a slap in the face. Not because they intended to, but because they were doing something broad. It happens.
So basically, to come back to the question of, do you have a code of conduct? What you're basically saying is it is a work in progress, and you're taking a lot of different elements into consideration about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because I think it's the most important thing you have is not simply that there be a code and that it be inflexible, but that you have a code that has understanding of others as part of its core.
Is the Winnipeg Bid Committee open to having external input on a code of conduct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so people can get in touch via the contact us section of the website if they say have an area of concern, and they can address it that way.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, if they have a concern about what might happen to them at convention, we're open to hearing it. We can't promise that everything will go perfectly, because people are people and they will do things when you least expect it. But we will do our damnedest to make sure that you have a pleasant experience. Sorry, I'm getting supper.
That's okay. So folks, the way that this works is do a Google search for Winnipeg in 23 Worldcon. That will take you to our main website. And then you can go to the contact us section and just fill in the form there, and you can submit ideas or concerns that way. I'd like to move on to question number 7, which we've already covered in part. What do diversity and inclusion mean to you?
I always have a difficult time with that type of question.
I think you kind of answered it with the, the multicultural umbrella idea.
It does, but I'm looking at that from a different viewpoint right now, and I was going to answer respect towards you and respect towards me. It's got to be a two-way street. If you trying to show respect to everyone, I think, is the key point of diversity and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is welcome as long as you are respectful of differences. That's the key point, right? Because being a Canadian, multiculturalism is almost baked into our soul, if you will. And I think that's why sometimes I have very difficult when this first started being a point of contention. Let's say I was a little bit surprised. It didn't even occur to me that it could be a point of contention. It took me a while to understand it.
Okay.
It's important thing people forget about inclusion.
Yeah.
It is about not necessarily being the other, but accepting the other as not being other, being part of.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to become Native American or First Nation to accept them.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to accept them.
Yeah.
And likewise,
that's one of the things that a lot of people have problems with for some obscure reason I don't understand.
Well, and likewise, you don't have to be part of the LGBTQ plus community to offer inclusion to members of that community.
Mm-hmm.
No, of course not.
And vice versa, strangely. When I moved to Los Angeles, I would say that 50% of the people in my initial group of friends were LGBTQX. And certainly I still have friends within that area. So I'm always surprised when somebody says, well, that's not normal. Because I know a lot of people like that. So I just sort of, yeah, actually it is.
The next question actually is two-parter. How are you working towards your goals in the areas we've described or talked about? And what would concrete achievements look like in those areas, in your opinion?
Being thanked for inclusion by various community members or community leaders, I guess, would be one way of measuring success.
And another way is a simple one. It's looking around and seeing people enjoying themselves despite their differences, despite where they're from, despite who they are, despite how they view the universe. And they're still all getting along and having a good time and enjoying the convention. This is the biggest measure of whether or not you've succeeded.
Well, yeah.
I agree.
How much diversity you see around you and how well it's enjoying itself.
Yeah. And I think also honoring diversity by offering many options, in a sense, in terms of programming, in terms of options, like, for example, Terry, you were saying about the wheelchairs and the scooters, actively offering the opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone have anything else to add on that particular point?
To add to what both Robbie and Terry have said is we want it to be normal, that acceptance. It's the mark isn't just that everything goes smoothly, but it feels in some ways mundane. That is the natural course of things.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. Let's move on to the next question. We only have 3 more questions to go before we switch to Carl's segment. This next question is, what changes or challenges do you expect the current pandemic to present?
Hopefully none in 2023. The problem is that heaven forbid, if we have to actually switch to all virtual because the pandemic has flared up, that's a possibility we have to be prepared for. I don't think it'll happen, but we have to be ready for it.
Well, this leads on to the second to last question. Have you planned for a virtual component to your convention?
Oh yes, we absolutely plan to have some sort of virtual component to the convention, regardless of the status of the pandemic. I just don't want it to be an all virtual convention.
Mhm.
Okay, and am I right in guessing that at this point that is in consideration and negotiation?
Consideration, negotiation means actually moving forward towards it.
So not
Yeah.
quite at that stage yet.
Yeah.
No, and I think one of the things Terry's trying to point out is that we are planning a virtual aspect to the convention because it has been noted by several conventions that there are people who enjoy the virtual aspect of conventions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Matter of fact, the virtual aspect will actually expand our inclusivity, if you will, because we'll be able to include a geographic reach beyond just Winnipeg.
Yes.
Yeah, and also just an economic reach for people that can't afford to travel to Winnipeg.
Well, yes,
Yes.
there's that too. Yeah.
So basically, in that case, are you thinking maybe that supporting membership would involve a virtual component automatically, or would virtual attending be like a little bit more?
Probably a little bit more because we'd have to re-examine what a supporting membership means in that case.
Mhm.
Okay, but you are open to that.
Yes.
Okay. Last question before we move to Carl's segment. Your members vote for Hugo finalists who are then excited and wish to play a full part in the convention program. How do you plan to facilitate the Hugo finalists' input as recognized by your community?
I think we need to recognize that for the longest time, the Worldcon has had a great number of Hugo finalists have already been part of the of the Worldcon. Let me.
That's okay, take your time.
I think this partly plays into the fact that traditionally Worldcon has always been and will remain by the fans for the fans.
Yeah.
And that really is an approach that I think we have faltered in explaining well to people who do not necessarily consider themselves part of this community.
Yeah. I think it used to be that a large number of Hugo finalists were, for want of a better word, some of the more elite members of the Worldcon planning or the Worldcon community already. So the idea that they weren't feeling as if they were part of the community itself took me by surprise when they first showing up. Because I always thought they were part of the community.
I think one of the things is that, particularly among newer authors, newer artists, newer.
Well, we're also adding new
creators.
categories of Hugo finalists too. Sorry,
Mhm.
there's
Getting
that aspect
people
too.
who haven't yet been part of the community in a way where they're recognized, but they've been part of the community perhaps just as an attendee. So if they haven't been able to afford the Worldcon this year, but they get a Hugo nomination, they may decide to come, which is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
But then they don't quite know how to approach the concept of how do I get involved at a higher level than just as an attendee.
Now,
One of the
with
things that's
this,
important is to get those people running programming to, if you will, leave gaps. Got 5 spaces on the panel? Leave 1 blank. You can fill it at the last minute. It's possible. If you have a Hugo nominee who fits this category, by gum, there you go. You've got an invitee for that panel. And I think that's part of what we need to think about. Frequently, programming works on the theory of I need to have everything solid and sewn up by such and such a date, otherwise I'm in trouble. Sometimes that date's just shortly after the Hugo nominations or just shortly before the Hugo winners are selected, but not announced. because of course they're not announced till the convention.
So basically what you're saying then is create opportunities for Hugo nominees to take part in programming by leaving these spaces available for them even before they're announced.
I'd actually go further. I'd actually like to include some. Well, the problem is you don't know your nominee until fairly shortly, relatively speaking, before the convention.
Yeah.
But I would like to see them more involved in the planning and the running of the convention.
How do you see that working?
If I knew that, I'd be.
You'd be king of the con chairs.
Exactly. Yeah.
A lot of it is about.
But it surprises me. Sorry, it surprises me sometimes how ignorant, how unaware Hugo nominees are of our traditions, and that's something we need to address. And sometimes that could include abolishing some of our traditions.
Such as?
I don't know offhand.
But yeah, I see what you mean. You know, I mean, would something like a Worldcon culture package to send out to them be something to consider? Basically, you know, a 2 or 3 page document that just says, look, this is the fan culture.
Well, okay, here's one thing that I think I could address immediately. Often an award nominee for, I'm not talking outside of our community, expects to be put up and flown in.
Yeah, as if they're a guest.
As if they're a guest. We can't afford that.
No, definitely not.
And so that comes as a shock to a lot of them.
But that would be part of the culture package.
Yes, it would be. Yeah.
You know, this is what a guest of honor is. This is what you are as a Hugo nominee. You know, one is not necessarily greater than the other, but they are very different.
Yeah.
And a lot of them don't understand that the volunteer-driven background of Worldcon means that, with the exception of the guests of honor, everybody, including Terry, including me, including Robbie, everybody else on here, we're all expected to pay our own way to this. This is something we do for fun. We pay our 3-digit membership fees. And so,
you know, I mean, and I think actually that a culture package would be a great thing, because it wouldn't just be used like this year. It could be used in subsequent years if it's general enough to describe the culture accurately.
Oh, it should be. I mean, we're not going to be that different, I think.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, you know, I personally think that would be brilliant. It would just be a matter of who would do it and when would we send it out.
Well, I think part of the thing for that is that even before the Hugo, because this is something that could be proactively done. It could be sent
to every single supporting member or whatever.
Yeah, hi, this is, you know, for those of you who are new to Worldcon, this is what the culture is like. This is
Terry wants to get a word in edgewise.
That's okay. They're repeating some of the things I was going to say.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Terry.
Oh, I forget at this point. Oh, right. Okay. It definitely has to be sent out at the same time as they are nominated. When they accept the nomination, it definitely has to be accepted. You know, here is what we expect of you. Here's what you can expect of us. You can even do it that way, as a sort of, you know, it could take several forms, and actually we probably need to expand it to the general membership in terms of what is a Worldcon is always. I mean, it's fun for me, but it's not necessarily fun for everyone that we think would have fun for it, and we need to explain that. And it's still it's also more a problem of outreach.
Yeah, and the thing is, we don't just have to send it to people who have signed up. It could be on the website. It could be, you know, sent out in publicity packages. It would have a lot of uses, so that people would know, is Worldcon a good fit for me?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. Because there are going to be
and what role do I, as a nominated Hugo artist, play in this great, you know, drama that is the Worldcon?
Yeah.
And I mean drama in the Shakespearean sense, by the way.
Yeah. And it
Mm.
is important to realize that Worldcon is not a commercial thing.
No,
The
it's
World
by the
Science
fans for the
Fiction
fans.
Society is an unincorporated group. And you're a member of it any year you belong to the convention.
Mhm.
But you're not the rest of the time. So if you're not a member, you're not currently part of the group.
If
But
anybody
next
would
year
like,
you might be.
if anybody would like to see that explained in detail, there is a YouTube video about it. Janny, which one is that? Is that one of the Zoom videos or one of the Twitch videos?
It's one of the Zoom videos, the interview with Kevin.
Kevin Stanley, yes.
Yeah.
That one explains in very great detail what WSFS is and how you become a member of WSFS and then how you are no longer a member of WSFS. But yeah, basically, any year you belong to the World Science Fiction Convention, you're a member of WSFS. And any year you're not a member of the convention, you're not. So does anyone else have anything to say in regards to the Hugo finalist question? I think we've gone a little bit around the block on it, but.
I think so too, but I think the most important thing is if anyone's a Hugo nominee and they're planning on attending, the first thing they need to do is tell us, hi, I'm available, let me know what I can do. Not what I am doing, what I can do.
If they want to do anything, they might just want to,
absolutely.
attend and, attend the Hugo ceremony and that's it, The key here being that you don't have to be any more involved than you want to be involved.
Well, okay, I'll put an example.
True of anybody attending.
Okay, yeah, you're assuming they're attending. A Hugo nominee doesn't have to attend. They could actually designate someone to be an acceptor on their part. Right there, that's something, that's an expectation. Do you accept? 2, do you plan to be present? 3, if you are, great, and we go down a list of things. 4, if not, who will be your acceptor is something we have to.
But that could all be
the package.
Exactly, that could all be part of this little package that automatically goes to Hugo people.
Yes, exactly.
So,
yeah,
as well as the basic package that goes to any supporting member or that we're using for publicity purposes or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything to say in terms of that question? Doesn't look like it.
Well, I will say one thing that has recently popped up, and it goes along with the clear communication of the nominees, because there has been this discussion about how many people can you list on a single finalist listing. And to be clear about that, we are all about acknowledging people for the work that they've done. However, people should also be aware that it unfortunately will have to meet the ugly realities of physical capacity and financial limitations. So pixels are easy and free, and we don't really have that many objections to them, but other things are a little tricky.
Yeah. Anything else from anyone on the bid committee?
In looking at that aspect, you need to remember, for example, that if there are, say, 30 categories with 5 nominees each, you're looking at 1,500 people. Now, they won't all turn up, but if one group has 9 people, one group has 12, one has 30, one has 2, how do you make that equitable, and how do you make that possible? You're going to select a room to have the Hugo reception, and you need to be able to fit everybody in. But how do you know how many you're going to have when you plan this? Because, of course, the planning takes place before even the nominations are open.
You might want to talk to the San Diego Comic-Con people about that and the Eisner Award ceremony template they use. Because the Eisner Awards, George and I have been in the Eisner Awards, and they face much the same issues. And I'd be very interested. I don't know how San Diego solved that particular logistical problem, but I'd be very interested to hear.
I suspect San Diego has one resource we don't have. They can throw money at it.
Oh, that's very true. They
Mhm.
can and they do.
Yeah.
But that's very true.
And realistically, they also have a massive space.
Hmm.
Not as massive as
They
you think,
don't
but yes.
use totally in the evening. So that gives them a bit of a ability to expand. It's not necessarily always the case.
Theoretically, yes.
Yeah, theoretically,
But,
obviously.
But anyway,
But
this
I
is clearly something that you're going to want to think about a little bit more and
Yes.
discuss.
Hmm.
If nobody has anything else to say, does anyone have anything else to add? 3, 2, 1. I'd like to thank the bid committee for their patience and thoroughness in answering my questions. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Carl, you're up next with questions submitted by the fans. And I'm going to keep an eye on the chat for you. I just have to step away for a minute. But I will keep an eye on the chat, Carl, and I will let you know if any questions show up here in the Zoom chat.
Thank you very much, Lori.
You're very welcome. Take it away.
I will do just that. So hi, I'm Carl. I'm currently doing all the IT stuff for the bid. And I'm also going to be repeating some questions from fans. And we'll start with one that came in through the contact form on our website. If you win, will you run retro Hugos for 1948?
We're considering it. That's all I can say because, yeah, it's definitely under consideration. I would like to personally, but.
Well, but there are also some issues with it, and I suspect that we may go the same way as Chicago of not necessarily running retro Hugos, but doing something to recognize the works and the accomplishments of the 1948 class.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the difficulties can often be the past is a foreign country. What was expected,
the future.
what
Anyway,
was
sorry.
acceptable, completely different from now. And if you recognize people from that era, you can run into big, big complications in trying to be inclusive. Whereas if you do an event recognizing the contributions of that, you can keep it to a reasonable, this is what happened positively, and isn't it wonderful, versus, oh my God, we've just recognized somebody who's a known whatever. And it is whatever, because they could be anything, and we don't know.
We've actually
several authors in that period, for example, did not use their own names. Why? Because they really didn't wish to be out there as themselves for their own reasons. In one case, it was because they didn't want their academic side to be aware of their science fiction side. In another case, it's they didn't really want people to recognize that they were female, and so on.
The quick answer is we started discussing it even before the question came in.
Yeah, but at this time you don't have a final answer. Obviously, it's still 2 years out.
Yeah, still 2 years out.
Okay, I'm going to combine a bunch of questions that are on the same theme here and read them all off, and maybe you can give a single combined answer. And I think it's partially answered already. So some of the questions were, quote, how safe is your convention location for the LGBTQ plus community? Are people of Jewish and other non-Muslim religions going to be able to enter your country? I think that might not be aimed specifically at this particular bid. It's asked multiple times, actually. And let's see. And another one about LGBTQ acceptance. I think that may already have been answered in the previous section.
I'm actually kind of pissed that people even think that their LGBTQ safety is an issue in Canada.
Well,
how about that?
Terry, these are generic questions aimed at all bids. They're not specifically for this bid.
Okay.
I think one of the things that is important to recognize is, for example, within Winnipeg fandom, they have quite a few LGBTQX people.
Like Lori?
And,
like Lori?
Like Lori.
Like Lori. Like Leamber Raven, who is a co-chair for KeyCon, things of that nature. People who have other experience, okay? people who have other backgrounds.
Mhm.
There is no reason anybody should concern themselves utterly, because law in Canada, as an example, Canadian passports can come in male, female, or X.
I'd also like to point out that KeyCon back in 2018, I think it was, introduced the write your own pronoun feature on its convention badges. That's how safe the culture is.
Yeah.
Within local fandom, is people were quite comfortable putting their he, her, they, them, whatever on their badge, and there was never ever an issue that I know of.
And it's very Canadian to accept everybody. There are people who don't, obviously, because there isn't a single part of the world where you won't find somebody who's going to be an idiot. Because that's my personal view of people who don't accept everybody, is that they're idiots, because they haven't taken advantage of accepting everybody and becoming greater themselves because of it. That's just me.
So a little bit less controversial question, perhaps. What is the theater seating capacity, not the standing, but the theater seating capacity of the Hugo ceremony venue in the convention center?
1,800, I believe, or 2,000. It's one of those two numbers. I forget which one it is.
There's finally a question you have a distinct answer to. So. And the similar question would be, how many party suites will be available in the main hotel?
As many as we can get. I'd be surprised if we don't get all their suites. I'm not sure how many they have available. That's what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
We are still negotiating with all our hotels, and we're going to try and get as many party suites as possible. But one of the things that I remember from the 1994 convention was when I went down to look at the party board on the Thursday night. I think there were 53 parties scheduled at that point.
So sufficient numbers. Is it?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. My biggest memory from the parties is a call from one of the rovers going, someone is pummeling cars with grapes from the party floor.
Ooh.
Well, what?
Okay.
It was very strange.
The KeyCon Hotel, the Radisson, has either 10 or 12, either 8 or 10 executive suites on the 15th floor, which are very suitable for parties.
Yeah, but the problem with the Radisson is that it's actually kind of far away. It's not impossible. If we could designate it as our party hotel, we're still figuring out which one would be our best choice for being our main party hotel. It may end up being two.
And the other thing to remember is that there will be groups who will have private parties, and certainly they're welcome to use any of the hotels. They don't have to restrict themselves to the party hotel.
Yeah.
A related question is the total programming space available for your convention the 3 auditoriums and 6 rooms in the convention center? In other words, only a total of 9 program items simultaneously?
No, we're bigger than that.
Yeah, 9 is small.
That question was actually directed at a different facility.
That makes more sense.
Has to have been.
Yeah. No, remember, these are general questions that were aimed at the 23 bids.
So what would be the real maximum number then?
I'm sorry, one more time?
What's the 20. Real maximum number for simultaneous program items? Is it more than
20.
9?
More than 20.
Probably. Yeah.
I mean, I can be really, if you'll give me about 5 minutes and go on to another question, I'll give you a number.
No. I remember counting it out, and it was more than 20.
Yes.
The one thing to remember is simultaneous matters depend upon who's in what. So, for example, if you have the main guest of honor doing a major panel, you may have fewer items on at the same time, but you have the availability to have a lot more when you're dealing with secondary issues that are not everybody's interested in it.
This was again a question about the maximum. And of course, you're not limited to the convention center. Should there be a huge membership, we like for Helsinki, we doubled it in a week because we had to. So
I mean, and you can always move it to function rooms in nearby hotels, for example.
Exactly.
Yes, and we have the listings for all of the hotels.
Yeah. I do have one question. If you don't mind, Carl, may I just quickly interject with something that I know local people have kind of been talking about a bit. Icon, our local Japanese fan expo, has a room devoted to, it tends to be a quiet space. It's right next to the St. John's ambulance station. So basically it's for people who have like sensory processing issues and stuff. Is there any plans for something like that at a Winnipeg in 23 Worldcon?
Yes.
That's one of the things I'm pushing for as
Yes.
Ops Division Head.
How about
On
no,
the
no, no.
grounds that
I will
if you
commit
don't
to it.
have it-
Yes, we have to have one.
no, it's not we have to. We should have it.
Yes, we
And
should.
if we didn't have it, we'd be letting down a whole range of fans.
Yes.
A whole range.
I'm
That's
really
why-
glad to hear that. Really, really glad to hear that.
I mean, if the chair commits to it, I think it's probably going to happen.
Yeah.
So relating to the question about crowding into the programming spaces, the next question is, what are your plans for crowd management to prevent overly long queues and ensure fans can get into program items that they want to attend?
I will point out that question is directed at a con I was part of, because which is Dublin, and the queues were ridiculous, and
The distances.
the distances weren't that bad, but I can tell you all behind the scenes issues that we had,
Mhm.
and I don't think we'll run into most of those issues.
Well, I
for
think
crowd-
the most important thing
control-
about queues, the most important thing about queues
Mhm.
is how you manage them.
Yep.
And how you space things so that the queue is all dealt with, rather than just saying, oh, by the way, too late, we're finished
Yeah.
now.
I
Because
mean,
I really hate that.
to put it in perspective, in order for us to hit the same problem with queues, we'd have to have, I'd estimate about 10,000 people show up.
Hmm.
And that's what happened. That's the equivalent.
Hmm.
Um,
One of the things we do at Gallifrey, for example, which has a great many different things for queues, photo things, autographs, etc., is we occasionally just set this is your time, you go in. This is their time, they go in. Everybody's got sort of time periods for it when it's really going to be a crush. So they're not all trying to attend exactly the same one. I think San Diego Comic-Con has something similar, but I'm not sure.
yeah, but I don't expect us to have any kind of
No, I don't either. But
major queue
just in case.
aside from the general, the miles long lineup for certain autographs.
I can make sure that we manage it so that people at least enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
There was a time con where a lot of people were basically most of the hallway across, and we
Mhm.
talked them into hugging the wall because the
Yeah.
wall was lonely.
Yeah.
It was interesting
Yeah. So
and it was fun.
Any other questions, Carl?
Yeah, this sort of been answered, but there's the general questions about accessibility and the availability of mobility aids of various types. Was that I think sufficiently answered in the previous segment?
I think so. I mean, we're
One question I don't know if was specifically answered is how many disability accessible hotel rooms are in the main hotel?
I
And
offhand do not know.
Well, Jenny, you're looking stuff up anyway. Can you look that up?
We'd have to look it up.
Yeah.
And interestingly, a lot of the websites, at least the websites, do not tell you how many accessible rooms they have, and accessible in what way, because there are varying standards of accessibility.
Granted, but that's the question. And there were two questions that I had, but I think they might be worth answering. So one of them is, Canada being a bilingual country, is the local French of Winnipeg or Manitoba the same as Montreal French?
Apparently not. Montreal French is not the same as any other French. I'll be blunt about that. Especially if you're talking street French versus the formal French versus depends on who and where who's talking. It's like you're asking the equivalent of, is New York City English the same as Houston English?
Mhm.
Probably not quite as big a difference, but there's There are going to be differences.
It's very much a case that each part of Canada has its own distinct self.
Mhm.
And part of that's because we're a small population on the world's
Mhm.
second largest country. Distances we consider quite reasonable, other people would consider quite unreasonable. We
Mhm.
would go from near Ottawa to Montreal for a hockey game and a dinner, and then back on the same day. It's 2.5 hours each way.
I mean, that was my commute to work for several years, but didn't enjoy it. But that sort of leading into a different question is, are there any plans to have French language programming?
Yes. We already have an agreement with one of our bid committee members who worked on the anticipation French language programming that he is willing to do the same for Winnipeg should we win.
Thank you.
The thing to remember for people, and lots of people may not be aware of this, but Winnipeg is just a little distance from a place called Saint Boniface, and Saint Boniface is French. My ex-grandmother-in-law came from Saint Boniface and was very, very proud of her roots there. And it's totally French. For that matter, my grandfather came from Edmonton, and it had a large French community. People just often think that only Quebec province has French, but actually, I don't think there's a single province of Canada where you won't find a French community. It's just the size of it may be different from, say, Montreal, obviously.
I'd like to also point out that here in Winnipeg and in Manitoba in general, and in Canada as a whole, actually, it's very important at major events, especially before the extravaganzas at major events, to acknowledge that Winnipeg is located within Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, Ojibwe, Dene, and Dakota, and is the birthplace of the Métis Nation and the heart of the Métis Nation homeland. And I think it's vital that we do not leave that out.
Okay.
That would be a lot of languages if you tried to do programming in all those languages.
Well, no, all you have to do is acknowledge that you're on the Treaty 1 territory, the homeland, right? And
that can be done quite easily, and very importantly at opening ceremonies, in the program,
closing ceremonies, etc. Yeah.
Closing ceremonies at the beginning of any major event, it can be acknowledged even.
I mean, it takes less than 20 seconds, you know.
Right.
And it's important. It's very important, because if you forget your roots, and they are the roots of Canada, you can easily forget what you're trying to do. It's such as, for example, when you're in Quebec, part of the roots of Canada include the Mohawk, include the Iroquois, include the Algonquins,
the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Saulteaux.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that has special meaning for, I mean, a lot of us have Métis friends and neighbors, and my husband is part Saulteaux.
Mm-hmm. And it's important to recognize this existence. It's also important to recognize the people who came after. There's a huge Ukrainian presence when you get into Canada's western provinces, Winnipeg, and so on. Shouldn't ignore that. They came over and they helped develop the country. They came over and they lived in sod huts in some cases. It's perfectly acceptable, but certainly not what we would expect nowadays. At the same time, if you fail to recognize the people who were there first, which is why we call them First Nations, what are you talking about? There isn't a Canada without the First Nations. There just isn't. Hell, the word Canada is a First Nations word, just spelled weird.
Well, so is the name Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Winnipeg means muddy waters, and that's a pretty good description.
Quebec, spelled in native fashion, is also a First Nations word. I think most Canadians are well aware of where their words come from, if you will.
But still, I really
Not
do think,
always.
no, definitely not always.
No.
It takes me aback sometimes whenever I come across that, but I do come across it.
But the thing is, I think it's important to remember to refresh people's memories.
And especially for those who are coming to Winnipeg who are not familiar with Canadian history. I think for them, hearing that Winnipeg is located within Treaty 1 territory acknowledgement really might give them a little bit of a mind shift. You know, and kind of make them go, whoa, you know. I think that's very Canadian.
I think it is too. And I suppose one of the other things that I find important is that we have huge opportunities in Canada because we can experience the world from a very broad perspective, having taken on board not just our First Nations, but also our Second and Third Nations. And not every place does that. Most places tend to say, okay, you're here, this is what we are. When I lived in Los Angeles, the thing that I really got most upset about was the number of Anglo-Americans who would insist that the Hispanic Americans not speak Spanish to each other, which is like, why? Why should you care? They're not talking to you. But it was interesting. Definitely interesting. Every place is different. Every place in the world. It's great.
Just as a side answer to your question, Carl, we will probably incorporate language as our volunteer base accommodates it, because we can't do linguistic programming without the volunteers willing to do it.
When you
We'd
say
love
volunteers,
to do it all, but you know, it's we are definitely limited to people power.
when you say volunteers here, you're talking about program participant volunteers, yes?
Both actually, because we've had situations where we have program participants, but then we had to find translators for them. So it isn't just program volunteers, it is overall volunteers with the linguistic skills required.
Yeah. For anyone watching this, that was a request from Jenny for you to volunteer.
I was trying to be a little bit more subtle about it, but yes, volunteer, sign up, sign up, sign up, sign up.
And I have one more question on my list. So if anybody wants to ask a question, you should either raise your hand in Zoom or put a question in the chat in YouTube. We'll get into the meeting. So my last question is, have the executives contacted our potential guests of honor? And I know you're not going to give any details, but have you had any positive responses?
Yes and yes.
That was too easy. Good news. Don't get me wrong. Very good news. Okay, then. So since I see no questions, and Lori, I don't know if you've gotten any that I haven't.
No, I haven't seen anything in the Zoom chat. Let me just double check again if there's, nope, nothing I missed.
So in that case,
let me check one more thing here. Because, nope.
I'm going to check the contact form on our website. Nope.
Yep.
Nothing.
And Facebook.
So Terry, you may want to think about closing remarks. We're done.
I hope we informed you as much as we could. There are certainly answers that we still are working on, and vote. That's all I can say.
Definitely. Vote Winnipeg in 23. Or put us as number 2. Number 2 votes often count for a lot. Look at Kevin Stanley's YouTube video on our channel here.
The other thing I would say is we are still open to taking questions. If you want to send them through our various social media, just because we don't address it here and now does not mean that we won't address it publicly later down the line. In fact, we welcome them.
I can see where we might want to have another one of these question and answer sessions a little bit closer to the vote.
Yep, or we could just make it, a monthly thing.
Yeah, we could do
There
that.
are ways that we can play around it.
We can. Does anyone else have anything to add? Giving it a count of 3, 2, and 1. I think we're good. Thank you very much to the bid committee for your very patient and thorough answers to our questions. Thank you very much, Carl, for handling the fan part of things. I really do appreciate it. I'm Lori E. Smith, social media host for the Winnipeg in 23 bid committee. I would like to say on behalf of everybody, thank you so much for joining us and watching this on YouTube. Take care, stay safe, and we will catch you all again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for hosting.
Oh, you're very welcome. Always a pleasure.
3, 2, 1.
And we are still
Okay,
live
everybody
on
can
YouTube.
read now.
We are
Oh,
still
yes,
live on
streaming.
YouTube.
We're
We are still
still
live
streaming.
on YouTube.
All right, let me figure out the right button for that one.
Hello, YouTube people.
I can
We're
stop
still
the
here.
YouTube if you want.
There were no YouTube chat questions?
There was only ever a total of 4 people, and it dropped to 3. And
Oh,
two of them were me and Jenny. So, oh, the third was Lori. So it turns out it was just us.
Well, if
How do
this
I
goes,
turn this thing off?
I'll do YouTube. I'll stop the YouTube.
The
there's
one that
something
dropped was me once I got the Zoom working.
I was about to say. There's one simple way to stop it. It's called unplug the computer.
No, that won't actually stop it. That'll just stop your input.
Oh, that's very true,
No.
isn't it? And then it'll just run and run and run. In
Well,
perpetuity.
no, if Jenny and I leave, the meeting ends, and that would stop that. But
Yeah, but the YouTube thing is the
Okay, I hit the pause.
it still says live.
yeah, Google is not letting me change accounts now, so I can't get it into our channel. There we go.
I just don't see a stop button.
You would think.
On YouTube, there should be, yes.
See,
I
this
can't
is
get into
where
the YouTube
this is where I normally break out the sparklers, you know, a little dance routine.
Yeah.
All right, I'm in the channel dashboard. It finally let me in.
And if anybody, I don't know if anyone can see it. I think you said it's not reversed for you. I'm using my special Winnipeg Starbucks cup.
Nice.
Yep. Oh, I was so happy to find it. Oh,
I think it went okay.
We're still on.
we're still on.
I know.
Oh, this is brilliant.
We'll be able to trim the end once we have it saved.
Yes, we will. And I'd like to remind folks that our next Twitch TV channel thing, if YouTube doesn't cut out before then, we're going to have one of the most strange and outrageous disasters in world history as one of the things we'll be talking about on Twitch TV next Sunday. And again, the hint is, how fast is molasses in January? If you want to find
Okay.
out the answer, come join us on Twitch next Sunday. 1
Is this
I
p.m.
got it, Carl.
Is this the Boston molasses flood or a different one?